and all the organization for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. I will share my screen, and then we will go from there. Okay. Let me just share my screen here. Okay. You should be looking at my PowerPoint presentation. Let me just move things around here just a little very quickly on my screens. I think everything is good. Okay. So can you see my PowerPoint there?
Yes, Celia.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome to this session of the Global Power Platform Bootcamp. My talk will be about M-code recipes. And just setting up the expectations here, I am not a programmer. I don't have a data science or computer science degree. I'll talk about my background in just a minute. So I have this very high level understanding of programming that I used in different situations. For example, I've been programming with VBA for 5 years or so now, and I've touched other languages before. Same thing now with the M code, which is the language in Power Query. I don't know all the details about the syntax. I'm just learning as I go developing different projects. And that's the message. One of the main messages I wanted to bring to everyone here today is that, like we learned how to speak our native languages, and for example, for me, I learned how to speak English. Is not perfect, but I can manage. So the same way we can learn M code and other programming languages. We need to pay attention and be curious, and little by little we will learn. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I am an Microsoft MVP since last July for my work with, mostly because of my work with the Microsoft Excel community. I founded a meetup group here in Toronto in 2019. Feel free to check that meetup group if you are interested in the topic. Every month we have at least one session, free and online, for anyone who wants to join us. I've been working as a consultant. My business is named Solvent Excel Consulting. I develop custom business solutions in Excel for different companies, different a variety of business areas. And I'm mostly interested in automation, making people's lives easier, simplifying, streamlining processes, and I do most of that with Excel and Power Query. My background, I have a master's degree in mathematics and another one in education. I started my career back in Portugal, where I came from, and I was a high school mathematics teacher for about 20 years before I moved into Canada. And then here I just started a different career at some point. Long story short, I started to work as an Excel consultant, and that's what I do today. But my teacher instinct is still alive, and so I have a YouTube channel, Celia Alves Solve Excel. If you are interested in the topics that I'm going to explain today and other topics related to Excel, mostly related to, again, make your life easier and simpler, automate your tasks in Excel, feel free to check that too, because I'm running free live classes there at least once a week. And then I have other short tips, short videos for just very quick tips. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Like I said, we are going to explore a little bit of the M language, and the purpose here is of this session is not to show you something very fancy, very complicated, so extraordinary. Like the name says, I'm going to show you just very short recipes, little snippets of code that you can apply right away in your job if you encounter similar situations to those that we are going to see today. And even if they are not similar, at least my other goal is to create some awareness. For those of you who haven't started to learn the M code or don't feel brave enough to touch whatever Power Query creates for us when it's recording the steps. So that's my purpose today, just to open your eyes if you are not there yet for the possibilities that we have when we start tweaking our code. So we will talk about where we can find some learning resources, and then we will go through 4 examples if we have time for all of those. So what is the M language? It's the language behind Power Query, and Power Query can be used in all these platforms, all these programs in Power BI, Power Apps, etc., etc. Despite this being an event dedicated to the Power Platform, I use Power Query mostly in Excel. So my demonstration will be done from Excel, but the reasoning and the M code and everything is the same in whichever platform you are developing your queries with Power Query. Okay, I would like to show you, let's see if I can grab this link here. No, not here. So the next slide, I'll show you the link there. So where can I learn the M code? There's, of course, many different resources online that you can search and refer to. I would like just to show you this one, belongs to Microsoft documentation. And from Power Query M formula, from here, you can access all the different sections of areas of formulas, functions. For example, for lists, we can see all the list functions that we have available here. Tables, so when we are organizing our data in Power Query, we are mostly working with tables. And there's a lot of things that we can do with tables. Just look at the list we have here under table functions. For example, I can get the table column names if at some point I need that. Most of the a lot of these functions, we maybe already saw them. For example, table.combine, when we are appending different tables using the append button there in the user interface. So usually we use Power Query, clicking the buttons on the Power Query editor, but every action we do like that creates a code in the back end of the program. We will see that, and that code is based in all these functions that we can see here. So you can refer to this page, to this library here, if you want to learn a little bit more, or just go. Of course, you don't need to learn all of them at once. I have not done that yet, or never will. I explore as I need for each one of the situations I'm developing. So I come here and I look at the syntax, I look at the parameters required, try to understand, and every day we get a little bit better at what we do. Okay, so what else? Another great resource for those of you who might be interested in exploring the M language more from the perspective of a programmer is this blog by Ben Gribaldo. He has this series of blogs where he goes into detail why the syntax is like that, why the code ran like that. For example, contrarily to other languages, the M code does not necessarily run every line of code that we write, because the M code tries to be very economical, it saves, it just does what needs to be done anyways. So there's a lot of very interesting information here if you want to explore. Okay, and how to learn. Again, be curious. Strive always to improve and simplify your processes. One day you build something, the next time you need to use it, maybe you can take a few minutes to consider how can we make this better. And pay attention to the formula bar. We will go there in just a minute. So we can activate the formula bar there in the view pane, in the view tab in the Power Query editor. If you don't see the formula bar, just click that check mark there. And then every time you create one of these steps here on the right, Power Query creates the code for you. And we should be paying attention to that, because even there are situations where the code generated may not be exactly what we want. So pay attention. And then in the button Advanced Editor, we have access to the code, the complete code created when we are adding each new step. Okay, so let's do some demonstrations. First example here. Let me take out the PowerPoint, and let me bring you here my folders. Let's see what we have here. So I have a folder here where I put different reports. These reports are all have the same structure, but people insist in sending me these reports with very inconsistent names. So I don't want to be, I have asked them, please change the name, always put the code of the store. This person did that, but the other ones, they didn't. And I don't want to be having that trouble every time to go change the names. So I want to find a solution for that. If I open one of those files, it's a CSV file, and we can see that the code of the store is in here, only in that cell, and not available throughout the report. And I want to combine all the files into just one table with the data from all the stores, and I want to know each row to each store where it belongs to. Okay, so let's close this. All the other stores have a similar report. I have here a separate file with a query that I already created. So if we come to Data, Queries and Connections, I see here on the right that I already created some queries. So I created a query that connects to that folder, and that's why we have all these helper queries here. And I have my main query, store reports, that connects to that folder. So if I double click, I open the Power Query editor. And we can see here on the right all the steps I went through. So I'm connecting to the folder, and then I am combining these files. So these steps, some of them are created even automatically. Here I expand the content of those tables. And because I already did some cleaning here on the transform sample file, it's an helper query that is created by Power Query. In this file, I have the opportunity to tell Power Query what kind of cleaning I wanted to do with each one of the files. So the sample file that is being picked up at the Calgary file starts like this, and then I said, okay, remove some rows at the top, and then promote the first row as headers, and then I splitted this column into client ID and client name. But now I wanted to add a new column here that has the store code. There's different ways we could do that. One of them is like this. So if we see here, the source step gives me all the sheet information, including that cell where I have the code I want. So if I go to the last step and I create a new step here in the formula bar, and for those, again, if you don't see it, just come here, view, and activate their formula bar. By default, Power Query always refers to the previous step. Split column by delimiter, it puts their split column by delimiter. If the step has space characters, then it puts the name of the step in between double quotes and with a hash sign before. But if the step doesn't have space characters like this one, source, I can refer to that one. And I don't need, I could put the hash sign and the double quotes too, but I don't need to. It makes the code much cleaner. So if I come here and say source, let's hit enter again. I go back, it's like going back to here, okay? So this step automatically named my custom one. It's the name that Power Query generated, that's fine. It's picking up the content of the step source, which is a table. It's a table. It is the content of a sheet, but when we connect to that sheet, Power Query creates a table with all the data from that sheet that it can read. What happens? Okay, so but I want that cell there. So I can, for example, start by selecting the column and right click and drill down. See what happens. I get the entire column transformed into a list. So it means that referring to a column of a table is the same as getting a list. And the way Power Query did it was, okay, the name of the previous step, custom one, and then the name of the column. So I could, in fact, I'm just copying this here, or maybe we can just delete this step. So I could do that here. Here, let me delete the step, it didn't delete. Okay, in the previous step where I said source, if I add the name of the column that I want in between square brackets, and the name of the column I want is column 3, sorry, enter, I get the same result, but in just one step. Now I want to get the value of the cell in the first row of this list, in the not a row, well, the first element of this list. So to do that, what I can do, I could do here, right click, drill down, or I can do curly brackets and indicate the index number for that cell. Because Power Query is zero based, the first the first item is item number 0, and then the other one is number 1, number 2, etc. So if I want this one, I need to put a 0 there. Okay, so I got the store code that I wanted. So I can name this, I can come to this step here and rename it as store or store code, the thing, whatever it's best for us. If I come here to view advanced editor, I can see that all the steps that I have here, they are presented here with the complete language, the complete code. Here I see the steps, the step names. That's what we see before the equal sign. And on the formula bar, I see the functions. That's what we have after the equal sign on each step. The first step needs to have, all the steps need to have a comma at the end, except the very last step that doesn't have a comma or anything at the end. And these, usually the name of after in should be the last step name. So that's a regular, let's call it like that, query code. Okay, so I wanted to go back to my source, not to my source. I want to go back to this step here where I was, where I had all the columns I wanted, and I want to add this extra column with the store code. To make my life easier, my life simpler, I come here and rename this maybe with base, because I want to start with this as a base. Okay, and now I come here and I can come to my formula bar and say, give me the base step again, which will be a table. Okay, I'm back to there. So I was in the base. I drilled down until I got the code. So now the code is defined by the name store code. And now if I go to the base again, I can say add a column, a custom column. And I want that custom column to have a name, store ID. And in the custom column formula, I want all the values throughout the column to have the value that I was picked up by the store code step. Does that make sense? If you have questions, feel free to let me know. Okay, so there we go. Now we have a new column just created there for us with the store code. This was created inside the transform sample file. So what Power Query will do is it will apply these steps to each one of the files. This is just a sample file for us to explain what we want. Then when we go back to the store reports, we will get the combination of all the files. If we come here, we see that we have data for the 3 stores. Each one corresponds to one file in that folder. Okay. So then from here, we could of course change data types and close and load to get our. I'm not going to do that. We could do that, and then our report here. Let's refresh. Will give us the new column with the store ID names. So this introduction here was to just give you a sense of the syntax, referring to tables, referring to, another thing that I didn't show you. So we saw how to refer to a table. I just put the name of the step that generates that table. How to refer to, let me go here. We saw how to refer to a column. I just add in square brackets the name of the column, and how to refer to a cell. I just had the name and the number of the row of that cell -1 because it's 0 based. What if I wanted to refer to the entire row, which would be a record? For example, if I want to refer to this row here, 17, or let's just choose one higher there. Number 2, 27, so Ernesto Gomez is the name of the client. We can see here that it's giving me the entire record, so all the values in this row. If I wanted to refer to that, so this I am in base, I could do like this. I could do refer to that step name, so the name of the table, and then if I put just the curly brackets and the number of the row, it was row number 2, so I want item number 1 because it's always -1. There we have a record here with each one of the table names and the values for each one of the table names. It could be useful in a few circumstances. We are not going to explore this today, but just so that you have the idea that curly brackets and name of the table refer to the row. Okay, so let's go to another example. And I already went through half of the time almost. So let me close this. Don't need to save. So now let's go to the second example. Is one of the most asked questions when I am teaching Power Query is, okay, I connected to a file or I connected to a folder, but now the folder keeps changing name, or the file, I want to be able to select a different, for example, a month and a year, and have Power Query connecting directly to that file immediately without me having to change the code all the time in my query. How can I do that? So that's the example we are going to see there now. This is based in Excel again. So let me show you first that folder. In this folder here, we have a folder named All Sales Files, and I have a couple of files. They are all the same, similar, but every month they come with more data. This file, the last file, will have data from January down to April. The January file only has data for January, and so forth. So in here, let me first hide here just to keep our focus on the query that we have here. So if we go to data, queries and connections, we will see here on the side that I have a query connected to one file only of that folder. So if we open the Power Query editor in the source, we see that the source step, we can make this bigger here. It's connecting to a CSV document and picking up the file contents of that document. You see, if we start paying attention to what the code gives us, it's quite simple to understand because it's if we understand English, the code is in English and it's quite self-explanatory in many of the functions at least. And here we have in between double quotes the path to the file where this query is connected to. So this path,
Celia,
yeah, go ahead.
there is one quick question, and I think it refers to what you're doing. It is from Rodil, Mary Ann. It is about how do you refer to a specific value in a row?
So in a row, I can use this example here.
Yeah, and there is another question from same participant. Can you export query from Excel and use it in Power App and vice versa? So this query, I mean to say, you are saying Power BI, but please go ahead and if you can.
To Power BI, there's in Power BI you can open a Power BI file, and then there's an option there that you can use to import your data model or your queries from an Excel file. But Vivek, you would even be better to answer that than me, because like I mentioned before, I work mostly with Excel and I haven't done a lot of work with Power BI. But
Yeah.
you can import from Power BI, you can import work that is already done in Excel, right?
You're right, Celia.
Yeah.
It's just copy paste.
And in fact, I know a few people who develop Power BI dashboards, reports, etc. And their strategy is to work in Excel first, because Excel gives them more flexibility, especially when you have to connect to tables that you have in Excel files. And then they do all the work, the measures, everything there, and then they export and do the final tweaks then in Power BI. That's one way of working. Some people do like that. So to refer to, let's say I wanted to refer to this cell here, 26206. So this is the cell of the second item is the first row. So it would be record number 0, and it's column ID. So if I refer to that last step, I just can come here. It automatically refers to the previous step. And then I can say column client ID has a space there. Okay. And then if I want the first cell, I say item number 0. If I wanted the second, I would say item number 1, and so forth. It's always the rows, you always have to do -1. So you see, we got the value there. If I put the other way around, we will get the exact same thing. So if we refer, this means, let's delete that. If we refer first to the column, to the row, sorry, the row number, and then we refer to the column name, client ID, we will get to the same point. So it's like looking at the matrix. You can either see row first and then column, or column first and then row. You will get to the same result. I hope I answered to the question. So going back to our example, I was saying that here in the source, I have this code hard-coded. It's hard-coded there. And I don't want to have the trouble of having all the time. So if you remember our files, they are in this folder, dynamic path to source file, all sales files. And then each month has a similar name. It just changes the last few characters with the year dash and the month with 2 digits. So if I can find a way of explaining Power Query, well, look, the path is always the same. It's always the same folder. It's always the same file name. Only the last few characters of the file name change. Then we can make this dynamic, and I don't want to be, I don't need to be coming here, having to come here to the editor and do changes there. So let's see how we can do this. I'm going to close this. So what I prepared here in this file is that in this cell, I have a space for the user to choose the year, type in the year, and type in the month. In this cell here, I have a formula in Excel that gives me the path where this file exists. So that formula there, and I can give you the formula later, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or something like that if you need that. That cell generates, if you see the result of the formula here, generates this path here, okay, up to there. So up to here, because this is the path where my Excel file is. And then my files from where I want to pick up the data are inside this folder, all sales files. So I just need to have to add all sales file to this path there, and then the name of the file I want to choose from inside that folder. So using this formula here and another formula here, this formula here refers to that result there and says, give me that result, and then add all sales files. It's the name of the folder, and then this is the beginning of the name of the file, and then this is an Excel formula to create the name of the file based on what the user chooses there. So if the user chooses January, we have January here. If the user wants February, then the name of the file changes there. Okay, so you need to do that preparation. Then I need to give a name to this cell that has the complete file, the complete path to the file I want to extract data from. And I come here to the name field and give a name to this cell. I gave the name month file path. So month file path, let's not forget that. In fact, I'm going to copy that there. And here is a little bit of M code that we are going to use. We want to say, look at this file, Excel current workbook. Inside the Excel current workbook, look at all the names existing in the file and look for a particular name called month file path. That is a range that in fact only has one cell, but I still want to look at the content of that range, column 1, item, row number 1. So the range month file path is just this one cell, column 1 is that cell, row 1 is that cell. Anyways, doesn't matter. You just need to get this bit of code in your library there, in your secret folder where you keep your recipes. Copy that. Let's go back to this file. And in here, let's access the advanced editor. Let's put this a little bit bigger. I hope you can see it well. If someone is complaining about the Zoom, let me know. I can make a little bit of control, can make it bigger. So the first step we see that has the path hard-coded. We don't want that. So let's create a previous step called maybe source 0 equal. Let's paste that code snippet I mentioned before. Like I said, it needs to have a comma at the end. And this will give me, let's do done. If I do this and I click that step, you see, it gives me the result I have in that cell. Okay, so now here in the source step, instead of having all the path hard-coded there, I can just go to, I can just mention the previous step, and the previous step gives me the result to put in place of that path. Okay, so everything looks good. And if we can close and load and see if we got our data. So here we should get data for January and February, you see. If the user comes here and says, no, I want the file for March. Okay, right click, refresh, or refresh all. There's different ways of refreshing our query. Let's see there, January, February, March. So this way we have a dynamic way to refer to the path. This would also work for folders. The only thing is that you need to do this change in both queries, the main query and the query that refers to the sample, that indicates the sample file. Do that there too. It will work if you don't do it, but it's best if you do it like that. So there's example number 2. Let's see how we are on time. We still have 15 minutes or so, right? So let me, if there are any questions, let me know. I'm going to show you another example. So another situation that can happen. It's quite common. At least for me, it's quite common. I guess it depends with the type of projects you work with. So in this case, I'm going to show a little.
Celia, there is a quick question, but I
Sure.
think in your demo you will cover that. So let us wait for that question to be answered at the end.
Okay, sure. Let's just make note and we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
So in this example here, there's situations where we want to combine data from different files, and the names of the files are not consistent, or the names of the sheets, I mean, the names of the sheets. Let's say, imagine in this circumstance, in this particular example, I'm looking at a situation where I always want the first sheet of the file. In fact, the file only has one sheet, but the sheet does not have a consistent name. And because of that, when we are generating our query just using the user interface buttons, it gives us something that causes problems. So if we look here at example number 3, I have this folder here with 3 files, and I want to combine the data from all the 3 files. If I open the February file, they are sorted alphabetically. That's why February shows first. This is a file that comes to us, and I want to do a bit of cleaning and collect some information about from these files. Just a few columns. I don't need rows from the top. I don't need rows from the bottom. And I create my query. If you see the name of the file, the sheet, I mean, here at the bottom, has a date, February 28th, the end of the month. This is a common situation that happens when the data that comes to us is generated from by other software, other programs, accounting programs that have that button that says export to Excel. In those scenarios, a lot of times this happens. The sheet comes with whichever date the report was created. Okay, so if we go to this, I think this one. If we go to this file here, you click enable content, it's giving me an error there because I already prepared the queries and the queries are not working. There's an error there that we need to solve. You see here? So in this particular case, I'm connecting to a folder. If I click, this is the main query that is generated when we say go to the folder. So here I have the folder. Okay, and then these steps here are generated by Power Query when we are connecting to the folder. And at some point we extract our content from here. And this is where, so in this step, we would expand this column content. And here we should get table, 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 and we are getting already some errors. Only February seems to be giving us the table, the data that we need. And here we get errors. And if we click not inside the word, not on top of the word error, just click on the side inside the cell, it says there's an error, the key didn't match, and then the key item 2019 February 28th. So I think this is familiar to us. This is what we have in the name of the sheet. So what Power Query is telling us, I'm looking for a sheet with this name, and I cannot find it for the file of January and for the file of March. Okay, no surprises there because those files have different names on the sheet, and that's why. But when we are creating our query and connecting to a folder, we give instructions of what we want to be done with each one of the files through this sample query here, the transform sample file. That if we go through the steps, we see that we connected to the file, and that file only has one sheet, doesn't have any names, any tables, nothing. But the navigation step is referring to, and this was generated automatically by Power Query. I'm picking up the sheet, a sheet called February 28th. And if this is difficult for some of you and we have time at the end, I can reproduce this query from the beginning so that you see where this came from. So because of this is being hard-coded here, that's why it's not working for all the other files. So what we need to do is to get this little bit of code here. And if we see, if you pay attention, what this is telling us is, well, go to the step source and then look at in the source, there's a column that says kind. I want to look at all the things that are sheets. And then instead of specifying the name of the sheet, I'm going to say, give me item number 1 of that list of sheets. And in this case, I only have one sheet anyways. Item number 1, which is 0 when we are programming because it's 0 based. And then give me the data that you find in that sheet, in that file, okay? So just need to copy this and go back to our transform sample file there. And in the navigation, I can replace all that. It would be the same as saying, I want a sheet. I don't need to specify the item. So you see, no, I would have to go. What this refers to is this here. In the source, we have these columns: data, item, kind. I want to pick up all the sheets and then just the first one in the list of the sheets, which is just one anyways, and then give me the data content, okay, the table. So that's what we do here. I would delete that part that says item, and I have to add this portion here with the 0 to indicate it's the first sheet. Okay. So it's giving me the exact same result. So it's good. But now we could even name this first sheet. That's fine. Data. It's kind of awkward, the uppercase and lowercase there. But then we can go through, move through this. Okay, I selected the columns I wanted. So now if I go back to the payroll, the main query, now there's no errors. So now we were able to combine all the files in that folder without errors and expand. Now I don't have errors here anymore, and I can expand that column that has the data for each one of the files, and I get all my data combined. Because now I'm not referring to a specific sheet, I'm referring to always the first sheet, whatever that sheet name is. So I'm not forcing Power Query to look at the sheet name. So now if I go close and load, I need to refresh here maybe, and now we get the data from all the files in that folder. So there's another tip here. Common problems that I have come across the past few projects. The final one, custom columns. I'm going to show this in a quicker way, and then if you are curious about them, I have videos, live classes on my YouTube channel where I am explaining step by step. So it will be easier if you take the time. If you are interested, you can look into there. So I have two examples here. The first one, this project, in fact, this example resulted from a question by one of the students there in the YouTube channel. Just going to delete the grid lines, remove them. He was telling me, well, I'm connecting to this report that has a number of columns, but every now and then my boss changes his mind. Sometimes he says, oh, give me just this column and that column. For example, I just want column item and buyer, no other columns. Okay. The next time he wants the state and the phone or whatever. So it changes, the request changes all the time. So I built this little table here that has all the possible column names in that data source. And then a second column where the user can put an X in the rows for the columns that he wants to pick from the data source at that time. So if you go item and buyer only, then the total column should disappear. So if I go right click, refresh, wait a little bit, and that column will disappear from there. Did not disappear. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time, but there we go. So now we have that. If I want to add this extra column, sold, paid, and cost, just put an X there, refresh, and those columns now appear in our result. Both data source and resulting query are in the same sheet just for demonstration purposes, but they could be, of course, the data source could be in a separate file. Okay, so how did I do this? Let's go to data, queries and connections. And what I did was I created one query called selected columns. And what this query does is it refers to that little table where we have where the user selects the columns he or she wants. And then I go through a different set of steps to make sure I select the rows only with an X. And then I remove other columns and I get only the column with the names of the columns selected. And then I drill down, which is the same as saying convert this to a list. And I get a list of all the column names that the user is interested in. Okay. So this is query selected columns. On the query where I connect to my data source, so this is connecting to the full table, okay? Then we change data types there, and then we remove other columns. Let me delete this step here. So we get all the columns, and now let's say I want to select two columns, these two. Right click, remove other columns. If I do this, Power Query puts the name of the columns that I selected, item and buyer, here, hard-coded. And they are in between curly brackets, which means they are, this is a list. So if I replace this list by something dynamic, I have my problem solved. So this other query here is the query that gives me, as a result, the list of the columns that the user chose. This result is produced by a query named selected columns. So I can just come here, remove this little bit of code there, and I remove the list that is fixed, and I replaced it with selected columns. Okay. IntelliSense already brings up the name for me. There, enter, there we go. So now the selected columns will be whatever the user chooses, and I don't have to be dealing with coming in this inside the query editor to change the code every time my boss asks me for something different. Okay, so I think it's pretty much it. Vivek, let me know if you should go to questions now or if you still want me to show the very last example that I have.
Yeah, I think it is good idea to go for questions, Celia, because we have
Okay.
7 minutes left.
Yeah.
And mainly one question, if I see, yeah, what during the session it was, what if you want to grab all files in the folder? So I believe it is when you were trying to use that 2 months, 3 months uh, uh, file
Oh,
that you were
okay.
grabbing,
Yeah.
and at that time I think it was us.
So if I want to grab, in that case, let me just create here all files from folder. So this is a new, let's say I want to grab all the files from this folder. All files from folder is one of the connectors that Power Query has.
Celia,
And yeah.
we are
Oh,
not
I'm not
seeing
sharing.
your screen. Yeah,
Sure.
please.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot. Thank you for telling me. I do this all the time. I forget to share my screen and keep talking as people were seeing anything that I'm showing. Okay, can you see a blank Excel file? So I just created this file now here. It's a blank Excel file. Let's say I want to connect to data by event. It's a folder where I have different files. So that's one of, if you start learning Power Query, that's one of the first things you need to learn is, how do I connect to a file? How do I connect to a folder? How do I connect to a file that is a CSV or an Excel file? It's different. It's a little bit different, those two connectors. Same thing with the folders for CSV files or Excel files. How do I connect to a table or a range? So these are the first things. So to connect to a folder, we come here, data, get data from file, scroll down from folder. And now we wait a little bit and it asks us, okay, where's the path to the folder? That's the folder here. I can come here, Control C, or I could just browse there. That's just faster like this. Okay. When I do this, because in this case, these are Excel files, this is the dialog box I get. And it tells me all the files I have in that folder. I can come here to transform. I could do combine too, but I prefer to go to transform and then do anyways, that's my preferred method. Here I get the information about all the files I have in the folder. If I am in a situation where maybe people tend to put other files there in the folder that I don't want to be imported, maybe JPEG files or any other files, text files. I could filter, do some work here, say I just want files that are, that the name begins with .xls, for example. There's other things, starts with each XLX, not S. XLXS. Is it correct? Let me go back. XLS. That's not the name, it's the extension. The extension needs to start, begins with, okay, XLS. I could do work like this. You will learn if you are still starting with Power Query, of do some of that preparation work. when you are happy with the result, another thing important is to say, since I'm talking about connecting to a folder, in the name, it's important to say does not begin with, the name does not begin with the tilde, because those are the temporary files that are generated there when someone has the file open, and that would generate duplicates in our data. We don't want that. So that's another thing you can do. Anyways, so then after you do this transformation here, that preparation here, you come to the content column and you expand through using that button there. And here is where you get to choose what do you want from each one of the Excel files. These files have a sheet, and inside that sheet they have a table. Since my data is on the tables only, I don't need any of the information outside the table. If that's the case, then I point to the table. And in this situation, all the tables are named table 2, which is important too. Otherwise, we would have to do a little bit of work, similar to what we did to choosing sheet number 1, for example. So there we go. Like that, I got all the files combined from that source, from that folder. So if we see the folder, we have event 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I get all the files combined. And I see that we have, but there's this example here is part of, you can see then the video there in my YouTube channel, because it's part of a challenge where the first file has up to this column, but then the other files have extra columns. The columns keep growing. And the challenge in that case is I always want to bring the location and the 3 last columns. So if you want to take a look at how we can solve that problem, you can take a look at my YouTube channel. There's a tutorial there. So let's connect to a table, and that's it. Yeah.
Okay, we are at the top of the hour, and our next presenter is
starting
here. Thank you so much, Celia.
Thank you so much. Good luck for the event. Pleasure to be here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Our next session